Welcome to my call. This is called Privilege Escalation in the House. I'm Carlos Polop. I'm currently working as pentester senior at Segwan, a Clarinet company. And today in this talk, we are going to see why is local privilege escalation important, and some tools that I have developed in order to find the vulnerabilities more easily. So, yeah, this is me, Carlos Polop. You can reach me if you have any question at the end of the talk via Telegram, via Twitter, maybe email if you're more traditional, but I will also be in the Discord channel just to solve for your questions. So let's see the agenda we're going to see in this talk. First of all, I'm going to try to teach you or try to defend why is local privilege escalation useful. Then I'm going to present the P suite, which is the suite of tools that I have developed in order to find misconfigurations in machines more easily, so you can just execute some script, find the misconfigurations, exploit them, and escalate privilege easily in each machine. Then we are going to talk about LinPs, MacPs, WinPs, and then some feature steps for this script suite. So first of all, local privilege escalation for what? As a pentester and also red teamer, I have found myself in several occasions where you have a cell as a low privilege user inside a machine of a client. So the problem here is that as you are a low user, you cannot do much things inside this machine. So most of the ethical hackers like me the first thing they will try to do will be to enumerate the machine and try to escalate privilege to a more privileged user, probably administrator or root, depending on the OS. So, but why do we want to become root or administrator? We prefer to have more privilege because we will be able to perform more actions inside the machine. We will be able to have access to better persistent technique, probably more stealthier, and the blue team won't be able to catch us, or it will be less probably that they will catch us just with our persistent in this machine. We'll be able to dump credentials for memory. Probably most of us know about this tool called Mimikatz, which is really useful to extract credentials from Windows memory. Being root or a high privileged user, you will be able to move laterally, move it more easily. This means that if you want to perform some kind of nasty, weird action, you will be able to impersonate a different user, perform this action from this user, and if the IT guy of the blue team just finds about this weird action, they will think that user was compromised, not the rest of the users. So we will be very helpful for stealth techniques. Also, you will be able to access a lot of more resources. In Windows, for example, you will be able to access every other user folder inside the machine, and usually they have credentials in there, so that will be really useful. You also will be able to access the register and modify it to get more stealthy techniques, persistent techniques. So that's why ethical hackers and not so ethical hackers, that what is important to learn about the local privilege escalation, because you really need to learn how to defend from these techniques in order to, if any unethical hacker compromise your machine, he won't be able to escalate privilege because you will have already hardened your machine. So what I have created here is a suite of tools that runs on Linux, MacOS, and Windows, that are useful to enumerate the computer, enumerate the machine where you are, and find all the misconfigurations. And it's really easy to find all these misconfigurations because the output of the tool is colored. So just with a very fast glad to the output of the script, you will be able to know which is well configured and what is bad configured, and how you can escalate privilege. But also, before creating these scripts, they were already there in the wild. Some other scripts that aims to perform more or less the same actions as P suite. But I decided to create these scripts just because the other ones didn't have all the enumeration techniques that I needed. Also because some of these scripts just had a really long output full of false positive and full of useless data. And that was really annoying, because when you were trying to escalate privilege inside machine, you will just run these scripts, and with so much output, you just won't want you won't want to escalate privilege anymore, because you just will get bored or reading endless list of data, of useless data. Also, I think I can say that my scripts have more text than any other script in the wild, and this is because very often I read the other similar scripts to mine, and if they have added any new tech that is interesting and that piece don't have, I will just add to it. So you will be able to find all the text in these scripts. Also, I think it's really useful to have the same output for Linux, Mac, and Windows version, because you will be able to, learning how to read one output, you will be able probably to read any output of these scripts. So now we are going to start with the demos. First of all, we are going to talk about Limpis, but before doing the demo, please let me present you hack tricks, because in this book, this is the book where I write my research and everything that I learned from CTS or for my work pen test. In this checklist for Linux, you will be able to find all the things that I think you should look for where you are trying to escalate privilege inside a Linux machine. So, for example, you will need to read system information, check the path, check the environmental variables, check the drives, list the software. Maybe there is some vulnerable software installed, the process. And if at any point you read here something that you don't understand, for example, you don't know what is a Linux timer, you can just click on it and you will be redirected to the biggest post, where you will be able to find all the descriptions on all the things that you need to look for when you're trying to escalate privilege on Linux. So take a look at this. Before using Limpis, I really recommend to take a look to this page, because Limpis is going to try to enumerate every technique in this page. So once you are reading the output of Limpis, if you don't understand the theory behind each check that Limpis is doing, you are not going to understand the output of Limpis. So that's what I recommend, to read this page and to learn all the known techniques on how to escalate privilege on Linux. So when you just run Limpis, you will be able to understand perfectly the output. So let's move to the demo. In this machine, I actually have two Linux-based machines. One of them is very vulnerable, and the other one is the one I use to connect the SSH to the vulnerable one and run Limpis. So I have already run it, because depending on the machine, it could take some to several minutes to run, because it is looking for a lot of different information. So just in order to not lose time in this talk just running Limpis, I have already run it, and we are going to navigate through the output. So I have run Limpis-A. This asks Limpis to perform all checks. Some of the checks are very time consuming, so by default they are not performed, but if you use the parameter -a, all the checks will be performed, and I really recommend that if you have time. So first of all, you will be able to see this nice banner, which is really awesome, and it was kind of complicated to create that. So the first interesting thing of Limpis is the legend, because as I have told you, Limpis is using colors to indicate things through the output. The most interesting colors are this red-yellow color, because it means that this is highly probable privilege escalation vector. So anytime you see this red color with yellow background, you should perform special attention, because maybe you will be able to escalate privilege. Red color means that, hey, this is kind of weird. You probably should take a look and investigate further, because maybe there is a vulnerability here. And green, when you see green, basically it just means that something is well configured or something is just a title. So that's not important. If you see green in the output of a command, that means that this is well configured. You don't need to continue looking at this. So first of all, we have some nice resume of the machine, some OS information. Here already we can see that Limpis has identified that this kernel version is pretty old and probably is vulnerable to some kind of exploit. Also, Limpis have network capabilities. This means that you will be able to use Limpis to discover other hosts inside the internal network or even scan open ports. Later we will see about this. And the first section of Limpis is about system information. Here we can see that, hey, the kernel is pretty old, the pseudo version is pretty old, check them because they are probably vulnerable. Here we have some system stats information, some environmental variables, because maybe you can find here some credentials, and also some Limpis will enumerate securities if some security software is installed and running, like for example AppArmor or SA Linux or ASLR enabled. Well, this is kind of useful when you are enumerating a machine, because maybe this security software will prevent you for running some kind of exploit, so it's good to have that information in mind. Later, Limpis will enumerate some device information, even mounted and unmounted file systems. If you find that something is not mounted, well, take a look, because if you mount it, maybe it's hiding some interesting information. Later, Limpis will list some available software, some useful software in order to perform post-exploitation tasks. And it will also look for GCC, if GCC some compiler is installed, because it is always better to compile kernel exploits inside the victim machine. Later, Limpis is going to list some really interesting information, like process information. Here, you also have to take a look to the processes being run by root, because if they are vulnerable, highly probably you will be able to escalate to root. So always take a look to processes run with root, and also processes run with other users, because maybe you can move laterally and from these other users escalate more privilege. Limpis will try to see if you have any permission of any binary process that is being run at the moment. In this case, all of them are run by root. So as you can see, as the processes being run before are owned by root, this is printed in green because, hey, this is well configured. Don't look at this because you won't be able to modify this. It will also search for interesting processes being run that may have credentials in memory. It will also wait for 1 minute to check which processes are run, because maybe there is some kind of cron, like in this case, that is run kind of frequently, and it will discover it. It will enumerate for sure cron jobs. Here, as you can see, Limpis has discovered highly probable privilege escalation vector, and actually it is a privilege escalation vector, because as we can write inside the path of the cron processes, and there is a cron task that is going to run a script without specifying an absolute path, we will be able to impersonate this script in this folder and escalate privilege. It has also found that, hey, it's weird that something is going to be run by root here. You should take a look. So that's why this is print in red. Limpis will continue listing services, system path, .service file. Limpis will try to search for a lot of interesting information. If you, for example, don't know what you can or how you can abuse a .service file or a .socket or what is the bus, I recommend you to go to the Hack Tricks book that I have presented you before. Anyway, if you just want to investigate just something weird that you have seen in the output of Limpis, here you have the link to the exact location inside the book where you should look for more information about this topic. The link piece is going to show some network information about the current machine. The most interesting part is the active ports information, because link piece is going to print in red anything that is listening locally. This is because before compromising this machine, you weren't able to access these exact processes that are listening in these addresses. So that's why this is printing red. Link piece is telling you like, hey, this is probably something new running here. Take a look. Maybe you can abuse it and escalate privilege to the owner that is running the process that is listening inside this port. Also, it will check if you can sniff using TCP done, because maybe if you can, you may be able to access some credentials in memory. It will also try to search for internet access, because, well, this could allow you to exfiltrate information. Generally, the next section that link piece is going to print us is about, well, it will show us user information. In this case, here we have information about our user. We can see here that we are members of the video group, and this is printing in red. If you don't know how you can abuse this user, I recommend you to just follow this link, learn about the video group, and learn about how you can abuse this group in order to try to escalate privilege. Well, link piece will also run sudo-cell for us, and as you can see here, it has actually found a lot of different software that can be abused to escalate privilege. It will also check for pseudo tokens. If you don't know what this is, just go to this link, because this is a really interesting privilege escalation technique. It will check peak exit policy. Another interesting output is that link piece will print us all the users and all the groups that the users are belonging to. This is really interesting because maybe you want to trace a plan to which users you need to compromise in order to escalate to root, and just seeing to which groups the users belong to will be very useful for you to know, hey, I need to compromise this, and then I will be able to perform this exploit in order to escalate to root. So this is really useful for that matter. Also, you can see here that a lot of different colors are merged. Here we can see root obviously in red because, well, this is a dangerous and interesting group. Here we can see the user called user in magenta. This is our current user. Our current user is always going to be colored with magenta. Then you can see some groups in green. These are very known groups that you cannot abuse, so they are just printed in green. Here you can see in light blue some other users. This means that, hey, these users cannot have a cell because, well, they are not configured to have a cell. But you can see here in dark blue other users, and that means that these users aren't configured to get a cell. So, hey, that's interesting. So, well, it will print also some information about last logons. Well, next section of link piece will be software information. This is really interesting because link piece will search carefully for specific files in dozens of software, and this is kind of interesting because link piece is knows about a lot of files that may contain credentials in different softwares, and it will try to search for them. And if link piece find them, it will try to extract the credentials. So this part of the output is really interesting. It will search maybe MySQL information, PostgreSQL information. It will try even to perform some kind of brute force. It will also search for SSL, SSH information. It will even parse the SSH configuration file in order to show you some dangerous configuration that you may be able to abuse. Here we can see that NFS export non-misconfigurations to escalate privilege is configured. So, hey, you can escalate privilege abusing this. Well, it will just try to search for specific files of a lot of different software. And finally, the last section of link piece is going to be interesting files. This means that Limpis is going to print here files that are interesting for some reason. For example, SUID files. It will print in green non-SUID files that you cannot have used. It will print in red the ones that are known to have some kind of CVE vulnerability in the past. Maybe if you're running Limpis in SUSE 9.3 to 10 and you have this binary in this list, well, you will know thanks to this output that you can escalate privilege exploiting this vulnerability. And if you see that there is some binary that isn't printed, that means that Limpis doesn't know nothing about this binary. So you should take a look at it in order to see if you can abuse it to escalate privilege. Also, you will check misconfiguration in LL.SO, capabilities. If you don't know what are Linux capabilities, they are searched here. You will check for ACLs also. This is something that not a lot of people know about Linux. Linux can also have ACLs like Windows, so you can take a look here. You will search for weird.sh files in path, and hey, you can overwrite an script that is in path, so highly probably you are going to be able to escalate privilege. Well, at the end, it's going to search for a lot of different interesting for some reason files. And if you don't know why it is interesting, just go to the link. You will also search for backup files, other interesting files, reachable files owned by me or reachable by everyone. That is like kind of weird configuration. Interesting files that are reachable before this user is belonging to some of those groups. This is always interesting if you find something here. It will try to take a look to the logs and give you like IP addresses or maybe password that may be appearing inside some logs. So yeah, take a look, because this is usually kind of the most interesting part of the output, because the other parts of the Limpis just go to find specific configurations. This last part is just looking for any weird thing. So, for example, playing Hack the Box Machine, all the most part of the important information will appear here, like some password, some random weird SUID file or anything. So this last part is kind of interesting. Here it is just searching for some hashes that maybe are hiding some kind of password. So that's Limpis. That's the output. I hope you find it useful. It has been really useful for me, because as you can see, just taking a look to the output and reading the colors, you can see if you have find something interesting or not. So I hope you like it. Also, as I have told you before, Limpis have some kind of network capabilities, and this means that it can discover hosts in some local network, and it can even try to scan and discover open ports. So this is kind of interesting when you have compromised a host and you don't have Nmap installed, and instead of using some kind of weird one-liner to discover hosts and to scan ports, you can just upload Limpis, see if you can escalate privilege, and use it just to enumerate the network also. So we are going to see here an example. So in this machine, in this case, I'm in this shell, I'm in the vulnerable machine, which has this IP address. In this other shell, I have this different IP address. So what I'm going to do is to show you that Limpis can actually find open ports that are open in networks inside the internal network. So if we just execute Limpis with -i and the IP address that we want to scan, it will just try to scan the top 1,000 ports by Nmap. So for sure, of course, the 8080 port is inside this list. So we are going to scan these 1,000 of ports inside this other machine and see if Limpis is able to discover that this port is open. So we just run it. We wait a few seconds. We can see that it has discovered this port open, and we can see here that actually there were a connection. So well, it worked. Limpis is useful to search for other hosts inside the network. So if we continue with the presentation, we can see that the next slide is about MacPeace. MacPeace is the Limpis version for Mac. Actually, there is no different script. Limpis will run the MacPeace version automatically if it discovers that, hey, I'm being run under a Mac machine. So this is very interesting because now you can already run Limpis in every type of Unix machine, which make it very, very, very useful for ethical hackers. Anyway, the version for MacPeace needs to be improved because I haven't actually found the time to perform an exhaustive research of macOS related privilege escalation techniques. So at the moment, what this is going to do is to run common Limpis inside Mac, which also is useful because it will try to search for all these passwords or all these interesting files. But well, in the to-do list, I have to take a look to more MacPeace related privilege escalation techniques. Anyway, I want to show you some output when you are running MacPeace. So you can see that this is working. If you see the help of Limpis, you will see that dash capital L means that, hey, force Limpis execution, and dash capital M force MacPeace execution. So we are going to force MacPeace execution. And well, obviously you can see that the look and feel of the tool is really, really similar. This is because it's mostly the same being run, just using different configurations of the tools. For example, here MacPeace, the Mac version of Limpis, MacPeace is using the command dscl, which belongs to Mac. So hey, I didn't phone it because I'm running this on Linux. Anyway, the ugliest thing of MacPeace is probably this banner, and I think that this just means that MacPeace needs to be improved. So, well, if you like this tool, let's try to improve it together. Let me know if you have any suggestion to MacPeace. And once I'm improving MacPeace, I will be improving this banner so you can see how is the tool improving. So, I run out. Okay. So the next demo we are going to see is about WinPeace. This is the script version for Windows. Actually, there are two versions of WinPeace. One is .exe, that is the best one that you will be able to execute and see some colors and everything. And the other one is a batch version. I create this batch version just because the exe version have a very high requirement, and is that .NET 4.5 must be installed, or 4.5 or higher must be installed. And if this version of .NET is not installed inside the machine, well, you will be able to run the batch version, which isn't as accurate as the exe one, but at least you will have something to run and to see if you can find any misconfiguration. So, as with Limpis, we have in Hacktress, in book.hacktress.doc.xyz, this checklist for all the things I think you need to search when you are trying to escalating privilege inside a Windows machine. As before, you have here your checklist, just in case you can want to run of it and see if you can find anything. If you don't understand, for example, what is DLL jacking, as before, you can just click on it and go to the bigger version of the page where every technique is explained. I also want to highlight that you should really take a look to all the information inside this page before running WinPeace, because the only way that you will be able to understand all the output and all the checks that WinPeace is performing is by understanding all the techniques that are explained here. So I really recommend to take a look here. And if you don't understand something, just dedicate it 2-5 minutes and learn about this technique. I'm sure you will be glad to learn about new techniques. So now we are going to see. Ooh, that was close. Now we are going to see as a demo of WinPeace. Anyway, as I have told you before, there are two different versions, the .exe version and the .bat version. Well, of course, I haven't mentioned it, but you can find these tools in GitHub. Actually, the link is this one, GitHub, Carlos Polop, privilege-awesome-scripts.shoot. You will be able to download them and use them. WinPeace have two different versions. In the first case, we are going to use the .exe version, the one that requires .NET. So if you come here, you will be able to see in the README, in the quick start, that there is something that says, hey, download the latest obfuscated version here. This is because I'm currently obfuscated every version that I compile, because, well, WinPeace is actually being caught by several different antivirus. So in the first, when I obfuscate these releases, at the first moment, they aren't being caught by antivirus. When it passes a week or a month or so without updating the version, they will obviously get caught by most antivirus. So that's why if you want to compile your own obfuscated version of WinPeace to try to avoid antivirus, you have here all the instructions you need to follow in order to compile your obfuscated version. This is using a tool that is called .obfuscator, which is free. So you will be able to obfuscate WinPeace just for the low price of free. So here you have the instruction. If you just want to try it, hey, go to this link and download the latest obfuscated version. You have here the version for any machine for x64 and for x86 CPUs. Just download the one you need. I have already run WinPeace because it could take, depending on the machine, it could take some minutes to run. So I just have already run it. If you want to learn about the different parameters that WinPeace accept, just use winpeace.help or go to the README and see here the help output. In this case, I have run WinPeace with the CMD. This is saying WinPeace to perform also the tests that are running a CMD. So just in order to perform all the tests, I use this attribute. Here you can see the banner. Then you can see the legend. You can see here that there is no red-yellow color for the output of WinPeace. And this is because, Windows is more tricky to decide if something is for real a privilege escalation path. So I just didn't put this in WinPeace. Maybe I will think about writing this later in some later releases, but at the moment we only have these important red and green colors. So as with WinPeace, we start showing some system information. We are running in a virtual machine. This is part of a domain. We have enumerated here some hotfixes. Something interesting about WinPeace is that it has Watson integrated, so you won't need to run it. If you don't know about Watson, just go to this GitHub link. GitHub Rust and Mouse Watson is a really useful tool to try to find valid vulnerabilities depending on the Windows version. Anyway, not everything that appears here is true, because Watson is just comparing the hotfixes that it found inside the machine with hotfixes related to fixes or vulnerabilities. But if you have a later hotfix installed inside a Windows machine, highly probable you will have all the security updates already installed, even if you don't have the lower hotfixes. So every time that you see that Watson has found anything, just check it by yourself. Don't completely trust it. Just try to check it. Check the last hotfix. Check the hotfix this exploit is attacking, and check if this is really a valid vulnerability or not. Also, it will enumerate some PowerShell settings like PS history file. This is interesting because you may be able to find interesting information inside the PowerShell history files. It will enumerate some protections and web settings. For sure, it will enumerate environmental variables because, well, maybe you are able to find some passwords inside the variables. And we will also show you some antivirus information and even the UAC status. Because, well, it's always good to know what is the UAC status just for the moment that you have a medium integrity process running with a user that belongs to administrator group. This will indicate you what you need to do, what you need to bypass in order to escalate privilege to a high integrity process. WinPeace, next we'll show some users information. In this case, our current user is called user, and it belongs to administrator group. That's why it is colored in red. Here you can see another user that belongs to administrator group and is colored in red. It will try to search for clipboard text. Well, maybe you have some interesting information there. You will list current token privilege. If it finds some token privilege that you can avoid abuse to escalate privilege, it will be printed in red here. I will check for some credentials inside Autologon. Something that I really like a lot of WinPeace is that every path that you see in the output have been checked by WinPeace. And if you don't have any kind of right or interesting permission over that path, WinPeace will print it in green. But if you have some kind of interesting permission over the path, for example, here we have all access, it will be printed in red. So you don't need to check your permissions against every interesting or useful path that appears here because WinPeace has already checked it. So interesting processes. Here you can see that, hey, all the processes are printed in red, in green. This means that we cannot modify or abuse these processes. But here, for example, WinPeace has found that this binary is being owned by user, and we are the user. So, hey, we have all access. If we can somehow exploit this binary, we will be able to escalate privilege. Also, it will try to check your permissions against your permissions over the folder that contains the executable, because if you can write inside of the folder, you may be able to perform a DLL hijacking attack. So in this case, we can also write over this path. So you will be able to perform a DLL hijack attack if you find that this tool is vulnerable to it. So, okay, we can see here that we have privilege over the tool we are just running. We have some privilege over these other tools. So later, we saw some service information, and here you can see just the same as before. If you have some kind of privilege over the executable, it will be printed in red. If it doesn't have quotes or a space and is detected, it will be printed here. If you don't understand how you can abuse this kind of vulnerability, just go to this link and learn about that. So in the service at the end, you will find just the same. You always check the red things because, well, maybe you can escalate privilege abusing that. Here we can see that we can actually modify tons of services, and we will probably be able to escalate privilege abusing this misconfiguration. We can modify inside service registry. This is another misconfiguration that will allow us to escalate privilege. It will also check your permissions inside the folders, inside the path environmental variable. Here we found that, hey, we can write over this folder. So we can perform DLL hijacking to escalate privilege. WinPeace will also take your permission over the applications, over the folders and files inside the installed applications. And every time that it finds a file or a folder where you have some kind of interesting permission, it will be printed in red here. And this is because maybe you can find some configurations that you can override, and that configuration is being run by a process run by administrator or by system. So hey, if you can modify this configuration, maybe you can make a system a process running a system execute arbitrary binaries. So that's why WinPeace is printed this in red, because you never know how you can abuse this kind of files. For example, here we have that we can override a configuration XML file. And we can override more files. Auto-run applications, WinPeace will also try to detect vulnerable applications that are being auto-run, because, if something is being auto-run by administrator and you can modify it, you will be able to escalate privilege. It will search auto-run folders. It will search several auto-run registries, or registries that are indicated, or DLLs or other binaries that are going to be auto-run. And it will also take WMIC for binaries that are being auto-run by WMIC. It will also check device drivers. If you find that you can modify some driver, this is really, really good, because you will be able probably to escalate privilege. It will show you some network information, some network shares of your current machine. And for example, here it will show you listening ports. As with WinPeace, it will print in red everything that is listening locally, because maybe it is hiding some kind of service you can exploit. It will print some firewall rules. It will take also some special locations where Windows is saving credentials nowadays, like Credentials Manager. In this case, it was able to find some users. It will check PowerShell transcript files. Again, you may be able to find sensitive information here. You will list the PAPI master keys. Maybe if you are able to unencrypt them, you will be able to access the secret, and maybe you can escalate privilege using that secret. It will also search for some kind of interesting binaries that may be disclosed sensitive information, and also check for always installed page and registry and WSUS. If you don't know what is WSUS, just check this link, because it's kind of an interesting configuration that you may be able to use. It will also search. WinPeace will also search for browser information, Firefox database, Chrome database. If you find these databases and they are not protected by password, you may be able to extract sensitive information that users are saving inside these browser databases. You will also even check for Internet Explorer information. And finally, like with WinPeace is going to print interesting files and registry. So the things that appear here are just interesting for something. For example, PuTTY sessions. Here you can see that WinPeace has actually found a proxy password for a PuTTY session, that is this one. It will also search for SSH keys in registry. It will search for cloud credentials. Nowadays, this is really, 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 really interesting, because if you have access to some account in the cloud, highly probably you will be able to find more sensitive information inside the cloud of the company. So, WinPeace will search for this kind of information. It will check for unattended files and even McAfee sitelist XML. These are like very, very old privilege escalation techniques, but let's take a look to them so nobody gets hurt. So if you are really, really lucky, you may be able to find something on escalate privilege. It will look for possible files containing passwords, and it will even search for node files that contain credentials in home. In this case, you can see this cloud access token, Azure cloud credential, and even SSH private password, private keys here. You will also search for documents because, as you may know, in a real environment, a lot of people will be saving passwords and credentials and sensitive information inside some documents. So this is the look and feel of WinPeace. This is what WinPeace look for. I think it's really interesting because just taking a look to the output, you can really see what is interesting, what is well configured, what you should focus on. But as I have told you before, there is another version. There is this batch version, which perform more kind of the same text as WinPeace.exe, but you can see that. So it wasn't run. I thought that I have already run it. Anyway, you can see here that actually the output is not colored, which makes you it's more complicated to read the output. But anyway, if you cannot run the .exe version, well, at least you have this version. Also, the texts are more complicated to understand because WinPeace.batch. Because how it's batch done is kind of difficult to create some intelligent, interesting script. So the way that we are looking for permissions over the paths of the files and the folders is using this binary called ecalcs. So if you don't know how to read the output of that tool, it's going to be kind of hard for you to understand the output of this script. But if you know all the Windows privilege techniques that I have mentioned before in the book, and you know what you are looking for, and you know how to read the output of this tool, actually you are going to find much of the same information here as using the other script. Also, if you are curious about how you can read the output of WinPeace.bat, this icalcs output, actually you can find an explanation here in the README. So just take a look here before running WinPeace.bat and you will be able to understand everything. So actually, I think this is not the last version of WinPeace.bat because we have already added some colors, but the colors are just added to these titles. So actually, the color just makes it nicer to read, but it won't highlight anything interesting or anything well configured. So this was LinPeace. This was WinPeace. We have talked about all the scripts available in the Peace suite. So next steps. Actually, even if these scripts are already very, very complete in the text they are doing and the things that they are looking for, there is a lot of things to do. For example, I want to perform some kind of exhaustive research on MacOS related privilege escalation techniques yet to improve Mac Peace. Obviously, not all the possible MIT configurations in the world are in LinPeace and WinPeace, and that's mainly because I don't know them. So if you know any tech that could be useful, just share it with me, share it with the community, and I will add it, and every person will be able to use it. I also want to integrate LinPeace and WinPeace in other platforms, probably starting with Metasploit, so you can just run a post-exploitation module that will run LinPeace or WinPeace inside the compromised machine, and you will have the output. I think that will be very cool. Also, I want to create some kind of parser of the output, so you can actually create nice HTML reports to have and store them and to read them, because probably it's going to be more easily to read the output inside a nice HTML report than inside this console output. So if you like these tools, if you think that these tools are helping people and are even helping you, and you want to contribute, maybe sharing some new tech, sharing some new technique, helping me with some research, or helping me with these HTML reports, feel welcome to write to me, to contact me via my Telegram, via GitHub, and just help me, and let's make LinPeace and WinPeace great. And that's all. Thank you very much. I hope that you really like this talk and you find these scripts useful. And well, just let me know your questions and anything you want to comment to me in Discord now. So thank you very much.